Hi, I'm Dr. Mike and this is NFGeeks. Well, this video is an Ask Dr. Mike video. Every Sunday on the Facebook forum for NFGeeks, people post questions for me to answer in a video, and whoever gets the most likes wins. Their question gets answered. And this week's winner is Ann Barnes, who, this is her second time winning. She has questions, she demands answers, so we got to do it. And so her question, boy, and it did get a lot of votes. I mean, people really wanted to hear this one, which is interesting. I'm kind of, because I had a different reaction to it, so I'll talk about that. But her question is, how do you think each type displays vulnerability? And really what she means is the temperaments, how the temperaments do it, SPs, SJ, NF, and NTs. Okay, now that's a really interesting question, and I guess... and I think it's a very good question, but in my mind, I was thinking, well, doesn't everybody already know this? And obviously they don't, okay? I had to sort of think it through about, what's really being asked here and what's really the answer? And I have it in my mind, but I mean, I haven't actually said it yet, so how would they know? Because I have to go outside of MBTI, start there and work our way in, even though, honestly, we're not going that far outside, to be honest. So... my main idea about this is that they don't show their vulnerabilities. What they do is they show the defense mechanisms that hide the vulnerabilities. Okay, so it's almost like you have to indirectly observe it. So we don't see people's vulnerabilities. They don't really show their vulnerabilities. Even when they say they are, they're really not. And what they're actually doing is showing something else in order to block or to defend or whatever. And it's in that defense mechanistic reaction that you will find what the vulnerability is and basically how they display it. So they display it not in actually showing it, but trying to protect it and show it in some other way. And what I'm getting at is basically compensating, overcompensating, and the inferiority complex, which are psychoanalytic things. So let's start with that. Okay. Now I think so. We're going to start in psychoanalytic theory and specifically Neo-Freudian thought. And that is totally correct because Carl Jung was considered to be a Neo-Freudian. I mean, he was once a Freudian, then he got kicked out. And the person who thought up the idea of inferiority complex, that's Alfred Adler, and he too was considered a Neo-Freudian. So the basic premises of psychoanalytic theory are involved in both not only what I'm about to say, I'm going to apply Adler to all this, but also Carl Jung himself. So I think the two things go together quite well. I think we can talk about Adlerian point of view of this and Jungian point of view and put them together, and that will work perfectly with the MBTI types, and I think that's actually the case. So I want to do a little bit of a review about this, about basically Freud, and then get into Adler a little. This is very quick, don't worry. And the basic idea is of psychoanalysis or psychoanalytic theory, as Freud described it very simplistically. The idea is that there's a conscious mind and there's an unconscious mind. Your conscious mind is the mind that's doing problem solving and thinking and awareness, okay, of thoughts. When you have thoughts in your head, that's your conscious mind. And then underneath that, far more stronger than that, is your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind is where all your desires and wants and needs and fears and all your animal stuff is located, operating off of the pleasure principle, wanting pleasure right away or wanting to avoid pain right away. And basically, the unconscious mind is always trying to overpower the conscious mind to get what it wants, which eventually it does because it's stronger out of the two parts that I've been sort of delineating here. And any kind of psychological problem is a result of tension between these. In other words, the conscious mind unable to figure out how to resolve whatever thing that the unconscious mind wants or needs. And so that creates tension, and that creates anxiety, and that creates defense mechanisms, ways of trying to relieve that anxiety. Okay? Now that's important because the theme of what I'm going to say is that the temperaments show their vulnerabilities indirectly through the defense mechanisms that are meant to block it. Okay? And these defense block from seeing it. And the defense mechanisms are inherently dysfunctional. Even though they have a purpose, they don't really help, because their sole purpose is really to relieve the tension and the anxiety that's going on within the person, which isn't necessarily good to do or helpful for social interactions or anything like that. It works in terms of relieving that anxiety. That works, but it certainly doesn't resolve the issue, resolve the problem. Whatever the tension is that's going on between the conscious and the unconscious remains. Okay, the defense mechanism hasn't changed that problem at all. Okay, it's just sort of relieved the anxiety of it for temporarily, in terms of dealing with it. Okay, and growth comes from realizing that, and whatever. So connected to that is Alfred Adler, okay, Neo-Freudian, and what he felt was going on, and what was in terms of defense mechanism, was basically defense mechanisms were meant to thwart anxiety from the inferiority complex. So the inferiority complex is basically unconscious feelings of a lack of worth of some kind, meaning that some kind of specific thing about you is very negative, and it lowers your worth as a person. And if it is let out, or people see it, or it becomes active, it will keep you from getting whatever it is you need out of life. Whatever you need, whatever's going to happen, the inferiority complex is going to interfere, and that causes, as you can imagine, a great amount of anxiety. Okay, and so therefore, what we do to fight that, okay, to relieve that tension, because that's unconscious. I fear, that fear that I suck, that fear of sucking, that's underneath. To thwart that, we compensate. So compensate is when you put you put some strength out from you, projecting out from you for people to see, that sort of runs counter or opposite of the inferiority complex, and you use that thing in order to get your needs met, because this other thing that's opposite of the inferiority complex is your strength. You get what you want that way if you go with your strength. That's not crazy. I mean, that's that's a common thing. When it gets crazy is when you overcompensate. Overcompensate is when you defense mechanistically go over the top with trying to hide your inferiority complex, or at least relieve the tension that the inferiority complex is creating. And so you go over the top with your defense mechanistic behavior, and it's so over the top that you're sort of revealing what the thing is that you're sort of weak about, what you're having some self-worth issues about. And here's the thing, this is what I mean before, that may relieve the anxiety temporarily, okay, in some way, but it's certainly not helping you in any kind of social interaction or getting your goals met or your needs met in any way, even though it sort of makes sense to do that. All right, and there's sort of and there's two ways to look at an inferiority complex. There's like the basic childhood Neo-Freudian thing of whatever developed under 6 years old, regarding your needs being met or your lack of needs being met, that resulted in the self-worth and the compensating and all that. That's why he's also the father of birth order. He's one of the first people to talk about how birth order affects that. It's cool stuff. Not relevant to this, but it's cool. I like it. I like reading Adler's stuff about that. I kind of agree. That's why. But there's one side, the inferiority complex developing in your childhood development, and then the inferiority complex sort of manifesting in your adult years in a little more conscious way, being conscious of something, but then always being rooted back to that more unconscious thing of inferiority complex that you've received. Okay, so for example, it's like for myself, my inferiority complex is that I'm a fuck up. Okay. That's my, that's my thing, that I can remember that. Everyone seems to think like, no, Mike, you're not. Like, really, you don't. You could come to my apartment, you'll see. But that sort of being that incapability of being an adult life. You know what I mean? That's sort of, my inferiority complex consciously as an adult. But Adler would say that's related back to childhood stuff of, not being parented correctly, not being maybe wanted correctly or loved correctly, and thinking that, well, there must be something wrong with me, because I'm not getting the love I need, as whatever, as an ENFP or just as Mike. So that's what he would, that's how it works, things like that. That would be the adult thing. Okay, so there's going to be So, because people who watch this, you're going to start thinking, well, my inferiority complex is that big. At work, I can't, go to the supply closet without stealing paper clips, something like that. And that may be part of your inferiority complex, but the real, core of that inferiority complex is something much deeper, much more horrifying, much more terrible, much more needy. That's why it's an inferiority complex. We don't even want to know it. It's so awful. That's why we try to put out this other thing, even unconsciously. This is where the overcompensation comes in. Okay, doing that's just so over the top because this one thing is so making us miserable that we have to, we have to hide it, deep down inside. So, that things like that, you have to, it's something deeper than whatever's going on. Even though you have this conscious version of the inferiority complex, something deeper is going on than that. Okay, and so that's actually consistent with Jung and consistent with MBTI. All of that. I don't think there's anything inconsistent there. With this idea. If you're overcompensating too much, you get the superiority complex where you think you're just better than everybody and better at everything, and that comes in. Because that's really trying to overcompensate for every little lack of self-worth going on in an inferiority complex that you can think of. So that's stuff to think about. So now let's relate this back. Okay, let's relate. I'm shutting down some of my notes. That's all. Let's relate this now back to MBTI, okay, and now connect it back. So let's assume that each temperament has a specific shared vulnerability, okay, and that vulnerability is actually a collective inferiority complex of worth regarding self-worth and a lack of worth, okay, and that each temperament then sort of goes through a collective defense mechanism against that, and it's the defense mechanism that reveals that's the expression of the vulnerability, because the vulnerability is connected to self-worth, inferiority, okay, and again, the expression isn't what the vulnerability is, it's trying to be opposite of the vulnerability or somehow channel something that's compensating for that vulnerability. So that's what we're going to think about. So let's start with NFs. Always like to start there. And I think the NF vulnerability is two things, connected. And one is being sensitive, having no shield, and being sensitive, and being easily hurt, and being easily hurt at any moment. Fragile, that fragileness, that emotional fragileness, okay, of being emotionally hurt is our thing. And what's connected to all that in terms of worth is that nobody understands and nobody wants to connect with that, okay? So there's a total lack of understanding and a total lack of people connecting in with those needs that comes in. Nobody can hear us. I'd say that. Nobody can understand us. But I think if I had to go back into, again, you want to go into, what's it like to be an NF child at 4 or 5? And that is sort of being in your own world that no one else is in. And so no one else understands, and no one else knows how to get your needs met. Okay? Now, how do we show that vulnerability? I think in a couple of ways. One way we do it is to try to understand others. Okay, and that if I figure you out, then I can help you figure me out. All right, that's our way for compensating the vulnerability of no one figures me out. Therefore, I must not be worth, the time to be figured out. I'm not worth it because no one's taking that time to figure me out. I have these needs, I have these wants. Nobody's can get it. Maybe I'm not worth getting. So part of it is to let out the, to try to understand others. But again, this is why it relieves anxiety but doesn't work. Because we do that, and we do that all the time, but the problem is that, it's not reciprocated. It's not ever reciprocated. It's not always reciprocated from the other NFs, okay? Let alone the other temperaments. And it's not reciprocated because the other temperaments don't care. They might care very much, but they're not capable of that. Or they may be showing it in a way that the NF doesn't want. See, the NF wants to be empathized the way I've talked about this before. The NF wants to be empathized the way we empathize with everyone else. Okay, and so even if the other types pick up some kind of need, they respond with the way they do the temperament. An SJ will respond with doing something of a helpful manner, not necessarily in a deeper emotional manner. Okay, expecting that back is what screws us up, and the reason why we're doing all that is to relieve the tension of we're not worth figuring out. And if I can figure you out and give you empathy, maybe I'll get it back somehow. That's part of the defense mechanism. The other defense mechanism that NFs do is the cat scratch, doing that, in order to defend our emotional selves, our weakness, to show our weakness, we're going to use our powers to hit your weakness. I've talked about this before too. So when we're going after your jugular, your emotional jugular, that's because we're trying to keep you from going after our emotional jugular, which is easily hit. Very easily hit. You might not be able to see it. The other tempers might not be able to see it because you're not NFs. But honestly, if you just carpet bomb, you'll hit it and take us down. It's totally exposed. So, you throw enough daggers, sooner or later you'll hit it. So, I think that's how we show vulnerability. So, one way of showing vulnerability is trying to empathize. Because our vulnerability being we're not worth the time to be spoken to be our feelings to be acknowledged, And then the other thing is we're weak, we have no shield, so I better lash out at you than hit your soft, center before you hit mine, So I think that's the NF one. All right, the NTs. I think the NT one is. I think, being separate, but being alienated. Not so much empathized, but not being understood. Okay, not being understood intellectually. Okay, and then sort of being treated like you're an alien, you're a robot, you're crazy, things like that. That that somehow you deserve the the crap you get for social skills and things like that. So I think that's the main one. I think being alienated and isolated within your own thoughts, and not having people not really understand you intellectually. That's what I would say the NT one is. And I think the part of it, the compensation of it, is wanting to be understood badly and connected with, but the defense mechanism is reveling in your own alienation. Okay, this is something NTs do, from time to time, and that's some of you do it all the time actually, but it's sort of NTs hate to be. This is particularly true of the INTJ, but it's true of all four of them. NTs hate to have that alienation, but at the same time they also wear it as a badge of honor, and that somehow it's a sign of their greatness, and it's that this is where the arrogance thing comes out with them, is that you're too stupid to get me, so it's really your fault. That if you weren't, if you just read a book, and maybe you'd catch up, and this is I'm too smart for you kind of attitude. But that's a defense mechanism against I'm too weird for you to understand, or maybe I am too smart, but it's a way that's alienating and makes me alone. So the compensating is to turn it into spin it around and turn it into a sign of greatness, a sign of worth. But the unconscious thing is unworth, is not worth. And again, it's unconscious. Okay, it's hard to, it's buried underneath that, but because no one wants to be alienated, and every NT wishes they weren't alienated. They not necessarily don't like, they might not like people in a general sense, but none of them wishes to truly be alienated. I never met an NT that really just wants to be totally alone forever and ever and ever. Some of them don't know how to deal with people, but they all sort of wish that there was at least one person that connected and was there and could get there. So I think that's what's going on with NTs. All right, with SJs, and this is an easy one. How do they show what's their vulnerability? Is the worried over chaos, that they can't control chaos, that random things are going to happen and people are going to get hurt and everything's going to go bad. Okay, the fear of the future is the SJ inferiority complex. The fear of the future, and I can't do anything about it. Okay, bad thing. I am powerless to a future that's going to unravel before me. Okay, and so how do they, that's their vulnerability. How do they compensate for that vulnerability? Well, that's an easy one, by controlling, by trying to have control of the environment, regiment of time, regiment of space, regiment of materials. That's a way of controlling the fear of, and again, it's about worth. I am not strong enough to take control of this. And even worse, if we get back to like 6-year-old stuff, I am not, no one's going to do this for me. Okay, I am afraid of the future. I am afraid of things going bad. I'm afraid of things unraveling, but I cannot trust that it will be taken care of. So I better get on it because at any moment it's going to go down. But it's also an inferiority. I am not worth to be taken care of. Okay, so I better organize the world the way I need to organize it. That's their vulnerability, and how they show it? They show it through control. That's their thing. And lastly, we have the SPs, and I think that the SP, this is actually a tough one. I think the SP thing, I think it's kind of the opposite of them. I think the opposite of them is I'm out of control. You know, I need to be taken care of. I need to be controlled. I'm not good enough to be on my own. You know, I'm not good enough. If I, you know, I'm not worth taking the time to, you know, to be cared for. You know, I'm not, you know, or to be set, or to, you know, my needs to be met. You know, I have to be kept in a box because, you know, I'm not worthy of love. I'm only worthy of being controlled. You know, because I'm out of control, and that's making everybody miserable. You know, that kind of thing. So no one will love me that way. The only thing I receive is, you know, a leash, and so that manifests in being out of control. You know, out of control. The most, you know, and again, it has this reciprocal thing, because the most off the rail SPs I've ever met had like the most hardcore SJ parents, particularly fathers. Okay, my friend John, who I talk about all the time, SP, his father was in the Marines. You know, he was a very SJ, you know, kind of guy, very, very organized and very, you know, and then John was like, you know, off the rails all the time, you know, with things, and it's kind of, you know, it's kind of comical. At the time it was comical, it's less comical now. But that, you know, that makes me feel that's what's being compensated. You know, what's being compensated for is sort of a feeling of, you know, I'm like an animal. You know, how am I vulnerable? I'm not in control. You know, I need to be controlled. You know, the only way I get love is for somebody to control me. So I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna compensate as not to be controlled. I'm gonna be off the rails. So I think that's how it comes out, those things. And now again, I do think that type is, you know, innate. I'm leaning more towards that. You know, when I think back about myself, my son, everything. You know, we're all sort of that type going way back. So I don't think necessarily a family brings out that specific thing, but that, you know, you're already an NF, and depending how the family is, it makes that better or worse. You know, it makes it, you know, it stretches it out more than you would want it to be stretched out. You know, and so so I want you to do. So I'm going to leave you with this. I want you to try to do some self-analysis with this, at least a little bit. Play with it in your mind, and it's not easy, you know, to do this. And that this is a little segue for a brief moment to talk about, and that is, you know, what I want to do, one of the things I want to do with NFGeeks is I do want to rattle people's cages. I do that in school, and I don't talk about it enough on NFGeeks. But part of what I want to do is to rattle your cage, and after watching a video or hearing something on the forum or Twitter or whatever, you know, you're sort of shaken. You know, I want you to be a little frazzled. I want you to be shaken up. I don't want you to leave happy. I want you to leave a little, gosh, what? Maybe I need to think about this. You know, so I want to kind of go into a little bit of a place of self-analysis. I want you to do it too, but to go deeper than whatever you feel bad about now. You know what I mean? You got to really bring it back into your 6-year-old self to really get to the, you know, the thing about it. You know, get to the bottom of it. So I want to lead by example. You know, when I think about my own inferiority complex, it's definitely feeling, you know, what does it emotionally feel like? It emotionally feels totally not heard. You know, it emotionally feels not heard, not understood, trying really hard to figure out people, you know, and try to get them to figure me out, you know, and connect back to me, and really working so hard at that, you know, and really trying to do that as a child. You know, I can really sort of feel it and think about it, and not getting it, like just feeling totally, you know, screaming, crying, and no one really being there and getting it. And so how do I compensate for that? You know, being unheard and wanting my voice to get out there? Oh, I don't know, a YouTube channel maybe with, you know, thousands of subscribers and things like that. You know, that's my way of trying to get it out. But, you know, part of the inferiority complex for me is that anytime any one of you sends me this email, you know, or a message or something about me or whatever, and even the people I'm in contact regularly, you know, you say very nice things and you give back what I'm so desperate to hear, but I don't know what to do with it. You know what I mean? I get these nice things. I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do with this, I hate hearing the bad things, but at least I get it. I'm actually not as thrown off my center. I'm hurt, but I'm not as thrown off my center. But when people send me nice things, I don't know what to do with it, because I don't have, it sort of reminds me of my vulnerability and my lack of self-worth. Like, I don't deserve to hear this very nice thing that's being said to me. This is not for me. This should be going to someone else, but certainly not to me. I'm a crazy person. And the best I can do, and if you send me a message, that this is true. I want to acknowledge it because it's very, very sweet and it's very, very nice, and people sometimes take courage to say things, so I would try to respond. But I can only get out like a sentence. I can only say, I really appreciate that. It was really nice of you, and I mean it totally. But I can't get any more out because it feels awful. Doesn't mean you should stop. Don't get the wrong message here. But I want to talk, but this is what I'm saying by compensating and vulnerability. I overcompensate by doing this huge video talking about all my crap, all these things, MBTI, the whole total, master of understanding people, personality type. I mean, I'm really sort of an expert here. I'm really working at it 24 hours a day, obviously, talking to thousands, talking to a bunch of other people, doing all these things, reaching out. And when something comes back specifically to me, I don't know what to do with it. I really, really don't know what to do with it. I get, it gives me anxiety. It really does. It gives me, and this is true at school too, in the evaluations, but it gives me a lot of anxiety because, again, it's actually hitting the worthlessness that I carry around with me. I am not deserving of this sentence, okay, whatever this nice thing is. I shouldn't be having it. I shouldn't even be reading it. I shouldn't even have opened up this message. It hits me really in a weird way. So, and again, but it goes back to that. It goes back to this 6-year-old self. And so that's what I want you to ponder and to think about that. So, yes, there's going to be, inferiority complex things going on in the present. Like, I feel bad that, I'm not that good at my job compared to Sally in the other cubicle. Okay, that's true. I mean, that's one level, but get to the other level. Why? What does that have to relate to your 5-year-old self and the family you lived in when you were 5 years old? Because mine's part SJ. I mean, not that they could help it. They couldn't help it. But SJs, my family had no idea what to do with me. They didn't even understand me half the time. They were SJs. It's not their fault. They're processing the world very differently. So you got to get, so that's just on that other level. The other level beneath that is the craziness I grew up in. But you could just think about what your 5-year-old family was like, and then connect this back to that. Okay, and then you'll connect in. All right, so that's it. I think that's plenty to ponder. Thank you very much, as always. And now, NFGeeks is trying to get out all over the internet. So, feel free to come join us on the forum on Facebook, the NFGeeks discussion group. That's officially what it's called. There's a link. All the links are on the channel page. But come join us at the Facebook discussion group. Love to have you. Follow NFGeeks on Twitter. Okay, I've been working the Twitter, and I have a Tumblr. So, and I'm trying to get that a little better. I've never had like a blog before or anything, so I'm trying to, I'm working it. But so follow us on Facebook at the discussion group. Follow NFGeeks on Twitter, and follow NFGeeks on Tumblr. Okay, so thank you very much. Remember, NFGeeks, that's where it's happening. Okay, and it is happening at NFGeeks. You don't want to miss out.